the same things that I felt as a kid, they are feeling, but probably times 100, where they're like, I am so far away from these other people and the rights that they have.
We're also facing conditions that our parents and grandparents, they fought for, that are, slowly deteriorating because people just stop caring about children and about the future.
We have to look at what's happening. We have to be angry. People are like, yeah, but it's not that bad. It's not that bad yet. But no, we're already there. I will still be there until the day I die and feel like this is wrong. I'm angry about it. I want human rights fulfilled.
I lost my backbone somewhere in Stockholm.
Hey, allihopa, and welcome to Somewhere in Stockholm. We are in a new podcast studio yet again, because I'm always switching things up. But hopefully this will be a little bit more permanent than the previous one. We're still in the same house, Filmhuset. And I'm Frankie, your host. And today we are starting our podcast here from this new room. Let me know in the comments if you like this new setup. And we are very excited today to bring you a new guest, Jehna Al-Moushahidi. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
We're very excited to have you. Jehna's path has been incredible to kind of like get to know a little bit more about in doing research about you. You have been advancing and trying to really push forward justice, equality, human dignity as human rights. And I think that this is something we connect on a values level. And you have a background in political science from Luleå University, a master's of science in international relations and diplomacy from Leiden University, and a law degree in international law and human rights. So you are very well off academically, very well rounded with those degrees.
Big nerd.
Yes. But I love that. And I think when you combine that, your advocacy and the fact that you work hands-on in terms of legal matters, as well as, advocating for people in society that are often, silenced or even unheard of. So I think this is part of your background. I think, you need that foundational degrees and foundational knowledge to be able to do this kind of work. So, as founder and chair of the Swedish organization against statelessness, Jehna has worked to bring visibility to issues around nationality rights, child rights, and strategic communication for human rights campaigns, in collaborations with bodies like UNHCR, Northern Europe, and Asylum Rights Centrum, so in Sweden. And I think that part of the reason why I wanted to bring you on is because you've been working so actively on these issues. And I think these are issues very much reflective of our times. And I wanted to kind of hear your story, a little bit more about you and what got you invested in this career path. Yeah. So we're very excited to welcome you. Welcome, Jehna. I hope you're feeling a little bit more relaxed.
Yes.
Yes. Now that we have been chatting a bit about other random things. Yes. I wonder if you can give our audience a little bit of an insight into how you got started in building up your background in advocacy and leadership when it comes to these big issues. Like, what spurred that interest, and what drove you to be involved in this career path?
And it's kind of like an accident, right? Like you kind of just fall into things. But for me, it started like very, very young. I was around 14. And I was living in a small town up north. And it was very clear to me that there was like socioeconomic differences between the people in the class. There was a lot of racism, all of these things. And it was so evident to me because it was like a tunnel. And then on one side of the tunnel, there were like houses, fancy houses. They had pools, they had horses. It was like very rich people.
Okay.
And then all the rest of us kind of were living on the other side. What was like apartments, a lot of migrants, it was a very clear division.
Yeah.
And in school we had to like bike to everybody's house, and everybody was to be photographed in front of their front door.
Oh, whoa.
I know. And to me, that's like so crazy to be like, okay, here's where you live. And we would go to some of these houses. They were like, here's my pool. You know, it was kind of like MTV's like Cribs. You know, it was like, here's my pool. Here's my horse.
Yeah.
Here,
They're doing house tours.
Yeah, I was doing house tours. And then for the rest of us on the other side, we're like kind of ashamed. Like, yeah, I'm living in this like old apartment somewhere.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was this like a school assignment?
Yes.
That's
So we went with our
insane.
school. We went online, like all of us with our bikes, and we would go to each and everyone's house, and we would take a photo, like in front of the front door.
This is where I live.
Yeah, and it was so crazy to me, and it was so already there. It was like, what is going on? It was like very like cliquey in a way. Also, like you could see like the rich people, like the rich kids, they kind of stuck together, and already there, I was like feeling this like feelings of injustice, you know. It's like, why is it happening? Like, this is so weird to me. And then they started these like Save the Children, actually, so it's like full circle. Now I'm back working there. Yeah, they started these groups for young girls where we would talk about all these kinds of things, like racism and what it's like being like, you know, 13 and being a girl in Sweden, and how do you feel about things, and that's where it kind of started. And they offered me like, you want to be a volunteer, and we traveled to Russia by bus, which is also like a nightmare story in itself.
That's crazy.
The bus broke down. It was like minus 35 degrees. We were in the middle of nowhere on the border to Russia. Like, it was crazy. Yeah, so we started with that Russia trip, and then we came back, and then it was like, okay, I'm now volunteer for Save the Children. And we do a lot of like activism, demonstrate, and all these things. And then it kind of grew from there.
And you were just a teenager when this was
yeah, I was like 13, 14, and I was so annoying already with everybody. I was like, but you know, this is racist and that's wrong. And my teachers hated me. They were like, could you just shut up for once, you know? But yeah, I started like super, super young, and then it kind of like went from there. And then I just, with studying and all these things, also I gained the like legal knowledge and the policy knowledge and all these other things. But yeah, I'm like activist at heart, so it like really started like on the barricades, you know.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you feel a little bit like an outsider then? Growing up?
Absolutely, all the time. I think it very much. I think I want to say it started very much with that like biking trip around. Like, this is my apartment that I'm so ashamed of. When you have your pool and everything. But also like growing up, like my father is Arab, my mom's Swedish, and I also kind of felt like I never really belonged anywhere. So it was like not really fully quite Swedish, but not really fully Arab either. So I think I always felt like misplaced.
So from that background and that childhood of feeling maybe a little bit out of place, and then, or embarrassed, let's say, of whatever socio-economic differences that you also had from your peers and your classmates, to then, you know, building a life trying to advocate for people who may be either in similar positions or worse off positions. I'm wondering then, do you feel like a child's, or in your case, how you started out as teenagers, you know, it's still children, a minor's right to, you know, feeling safe and feeling like they have a home and feeling like they have access to, you know, a passport so they can travel. Do you feel like this is, as a human right, it's still important and recognized today as an important right? Or do you think that there's been some, you know, some kind of legalese, you know, backlash where you're trying to find loopholes in these laws? A lot of people are trying to find loopholes in these laws to kind of dehumanize these children. So how do you feel about the sort of human right of access to, you know, not just a safe environment to grow up in, but nationality and citizenship? And how do you feel that that's ranking in today's, or valued in today's world?
It's ranking very low, I would say, unfortunately. So after 10 years of lobbying for the Convention on the Rights of the Child to become Swedish law, it finally happened in 2020. And we had so much hope about this, because in there's also the right to nationality for children. So also with the statelessness part, we were thinking this is going to be a problem that's solved. But with more and more right-wing politics and more and more racism, but also trying to water down the convention. See more and more proposals that are outrageous and that are in straight conflict with the convention.
Yeah.
So we see that more and more. And so many, especially with this government, like we see that they want to really, they don't want children's rights fulfilled. They also didn't want the convention to become national law. So it has been a more uphill battle. And we see more and more of these proposals, like putting 13-year-olds in prison.
Yes. There's been a massive push in Swedish media, at least the news that I've seen, that all the government officials, even the prime minister, are saying that minors are supposed to go in prison for a longer sentence because, you know, of the risk of what kind of adults they will become. I was like, what are you talking about? They're children.
Yeah. And looking at the one country in the world that has not signed the convention, the US, this is their exact reason, is that they want to be able to put minors in prison, and they want the death penalty to be able to execute that on children. So these are their exact two reasons why they don't want the convention. And now we're sort of also putting that into Swedish policy that, like, oh, children should be put in prison. We're also seeing new proposals of children shouldn't be heard at school. There should be more disciplinary ways of teaching. All, like, you know, once you have given a right to any human, not just children, but once you've given a human right, you cannot go back on it. So for instance, that is what they have done also with the migration policy, making it more difficult to obtain a nationality, which is like with citizenship laws, has been increasingly more difficult, especially for children to obtain nationality. And that's a problem for stateless children because Sweden has signed all these like treaties and conventions saying that we will work for stateless children to have nationality and for children to have nationality and for children to have rights in general, which is now they're going back on it. So it's really frustrating times right now. Yeah. But we see that we were so excited, like in 2020, it's finally national law. We will finally see some difference, and then it's going back again.
Okay, so let's give a little bit more context for people who are not we're not really into this political landscape of human rights and children, you know, human rights. In Sweden, at the moment, if you are a child of migrants or people who are stateless and you are either born here or you're raised here from a very young age as a minor, what access do you have to nationality? Do you have any access to nationality, or do your parents need to become citizens in order for you? Is it easier then for you to become a citizen? So what is the state of the matter at the moment?
So the state of the matter is that it used to be it's always been difficult. I'm not going to lie. Okay. So if you come here, and for those that don't know what statelessness means, is that you've never had a nationality, or you have had it, but it's stripped away from you. Yeah. And they often say that that is the right to other rights. So as a citizen of a country, you can demand your rights from the state, which means that if you don't have any nationality, you don't have citizenship, you can't do that. And it keeps people in... they want to control people, and this is a way of doing that. So for children, they are seen as their own individual in the legal matter. So when you apply for asylum, you will be treated different from your parents.
Okay, so like almost like an adult, you're being treated almost like an adult,
and which is why we see that there's some of these cases where they mess up, and it's like, oh, the child is to be deported to another country on their own.
Terrible.
And so we see a lot of these things happening, but they have not decreased the level, and they're imposing like, well, you need a language test, you need to prove that you have like strong ties to the country, you need to do this test about Swedish like values.
Whatever that is.
So they've increased the requirements to become a citizen, making it also more difficult for children because children cannot advocate for themselves in that same way, to be like, hey, I've been here my whole life, I only speak Swedish. Like, yes, some of them can, but some of them might not. If you're 5, 4, 5, like, it's really hard for you to argue on your own, to be like, I belong here. So it's become increasingly difficult, and they used to be like, you need to be here for 4 years, but you need to have a certain permit for those 4 years. Now they don't give those permits anymore. They only give temporary ones. You need like a permanent one. So it's become way more difficult because they're changing other things, and that has consequences. And it's also like they're changing things for the tax agency, meaning you cannot get the samordningsnummer as easily anymore, meaning you cannot work, you cannot make your own money, you cannot live with the parents, and therefore you cannot support your child. And that's also an argument of like, oh, but the child is not, So all of these like administrative things, that it's not just the law that they're changing, but they have changed the law, and that has consequences on the other laws, because you need to have. Because the requirement is like, okay, you need to live here for 4 years permanently, but they no longer give you permanent.
They're making the bureaucracy so, difficult that then it becomes impossible for people, even through the legal ways, to be able to attain citizenship. This is just incredibly frustrating. And obviously I have a lot of feelings about this myself. But where does that place these children in homes that maybe don't have that access or path to citizenship in a very clear, just way? These children who grow up fully in Sweden, where does that place them then in society in terms of access to opportunities, employment, or even education? Where does that put them if they don't have those equal rights under these laws?
So they have the right to go to school, but there are already some obstacles there. Like, for instance, you might not be able to buy a sandwich at the cafe in school because you need to have a debit card, and you cannot get one without having a personnummer. Or you cannot go pick up a post, like if you have the package that you need to go pick up, you can't because you don't have an ID card. So there's already the same things that I felt as a kid, they're feeling, but probably times 100, where they're like, I am so far away from these other people and the rights that they have, and that like the feeling of the belonging, and already they have a lot of obstacles there. And then when they get a little bit older, I'm talking like 15, 16, depending on what they study, they might need to do like an internship or things like that, and they might not be able to do that, meaning they cannot fulfill the program that they're studying. And as soon as they turn 18, they can finish like high school, but they cannot go to university. So that's where kind of life ends. And a lot of them are in limbo for 10 years, 10 plus years, because you keep getting rejected, but also no other country is willing to accept you. So you cannot get deported. So you're just in limbo, and you're just here kind of floating around, not really doing anything, and also like not really living fully. And of course, I'm sure that during their whole like growing up, they feel a lot of concerns about their family and like what's going to happen to us. Will we get deported? Are we staying? It's hard to build a life. And also with these all like small things that they cannot do, that we take for granted, like bank ID and like all these things that we just take for granted every single day. Like they have none of that. They cannot even open a bank account. They cannot save their money. It's hard for them to, like, all of these things is really difficult.
Frankie here, quickly popping in just to remind you, if you haven't subscribed yet, that's the one thing you can do that's completely free that really helps us out. Please, just do it. Click that button, subscribe. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So at the organization that you work for currently, and you can pronounce it much better than I can, so everyone knows to about your work, you often work with these youth, and the youth that are, from what I'm hearing, based on what you're saying, they're like second-class citizens. They don't even have the citizenship. So maybe they're not even second-class citizens. They're second-class human beings in Swedish society. And they're facing very specific, almost targeted, discrimination. They don't have access to the same opportunity, same social mobility to be able to move on in life. And on top of everything else, they have the anxieties, the stresses of living their life in limbo. And I don't even know what that feels like. I mean, I can empathize, but I have never been in a situation due to passport privilege that would make me even understand what that's like day to day. In talking to these children, what are some things beyond the usual teenage concerns? I think teenagers are teenagers. And I think that's also another thing that we need to humanize in these children. They're still going to face exactly the same issues that any other child will face. But beyond those, what are discussions and kind of in these circles that you have, what are things that come up? Like, what are some, of course, I know there's confidentiality, so you can just speak in general terms, but what are some stories that like either shock you or they're very banal, very day to day, but things that come up that these children are facing that maybe our audience should know about? Because then these are people, maybe they are meeting in their children's schools and they don't know what the reality of this child, right? Of this teenager. So what are some things that come up that you're like, I wish more people understood that this is what they're facing?
I think it's two things, and the first is like the lack of understanding. I feel like they are very frustrated. Like no matter how many times they tell a teacher in private, "Hey, I don't have citizenship, so when you ask for my official limit, I cannot give it to you. So when you tell me in class in front of everybody, hey, like you have to sign this thing for your official limit or blah blah, or like I cannot give it to you and it's embarrassing for me. Please stop." And they will keep doing that. So it's more the like social kind of game in a way, like where teachers forget or they don't understand fully maybe. So this is, I mean, this is something that's not really talked about, that there are children that are stateless in Sweden and that they are trying to live, you know, day to day and like have a daily life and go to school and all these things and routines. But the people that come in contact with them, are they aware of the issue?
Otherwise, these can sound a lot like microaggressions.
Right.
Because if they're not aware or if they're not conscious, like aware in the sense that it's top of mind for them whenever they're interacting with these children, then they will, you know, say something that is completely insensitive or repeatedly, you know, emphasize a point that just doesn't reflect the reality of that child.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people who don't know that this is happening in Sweden, they're likely going to do the same thing.
Exactly.
They're going to minimize the problem. They're going to say, oh, Prussian number. Everybody has a Prussian number. What are you talking about? You don't know what you're talking about. Like as if the child doesn't know their own experience like themselves. Yeah. But also I think people are going to minimize it because they've never experienced that.
Yeah.
They don't know the struggle or the hurdles of not having a Prussian roommate.
Yeah.
To them, it's just their normal, complete, routine life.
Yeah.
So that was the first issue. And what were the other things?
The second issue is when it comes to politicians. It is exactly this. Because they keep talking about illegal immigrants are here. And even in conversation with them, we've had dialogue with them. And they say, but they're here illegally. Why would they be here? Why would we give them nationality? Why? You know, and just the way they phrase things and how they frame the issue is completely, first of all, wrong. It's ignorant. And it's racist. And it's against human rights. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah.
You know, and that is what bothers me, that even the people that are making policy about this, they don't know and they don't understand the issue. You cannot make policy about something that you don't understand, because then you don't know how it's gonna you can't even start to scratch the surface of how it's gonna affect the people that are in this situation. So when they talk about illegal, no, they're not here illegal. They're here in limbo. Because you're not giving them the papers that they need, but they also cannot be deported because no other country has responsibility over them. And according to the conventions and everything that we have ratified as a country, we have a responsibility to make sure that they in a legal way can obtain citizenship. And they're not doing that. So saying that, oh, they're here illegal, they're illegal children, and also to speak of children as illegal, it don't even get me started on that. But, you know, it's so problematic in a way, and it just flies under the radar. The public is kind of like, yeah, well, you know, he's a politician, so I'm sure he's right. Yeah,
he knows what he's talking.
Yeah, he knows what he's talking about. But no, he really doesn't. They really don't, you know?
Yeah. So it's either like, as a politician, either you do know what you're talking about and you're acting from a place of, you know,
we're gonna do the
gaslighting.
exactly, and we're gonna do it no matter what because we don't care.
Mhm.
Or if you don't even have the humility to say, hey, let me talk to the experts and listen to what they have to say. I mean, this is just problematic in so many ways, because then if you don't have citizenship, you also don't have access to positions of influence and power, which is, for example, you cannot run for office. You cannot advocate for yourself. You can't vote. And you also then become restricted in the ways that these decisions that directly affect your life, you have no direct influence over them.
Right.
And this can be, I mean, I'm assuming as someone who has seen policy that does not reflect my values, doesn't reflect my opinions, my voice. We've seen policy, put into law and into effect, and being very frustrated about it. Policy that doesn't necessarily affect me, but being very frustrated about it because it doesn't align with my values. I can't even believe or imagine what it would be like to see policy affected that does affect me directly, and my family and my friends and my environment, and a complete disregard for my humanity, my conditions. This can be very frustrating. So tell me, with the work that you do at Rädda Barnens Ungdomsförbund.
Yeah, we just Save the Children Sweden Youth. So
Yes.
it's the youth section of Save the Children.
At the work that you do there, why is it important for this youth activism for us to raise the voices of these children to a place where they can have a voice at an international, national, stage? How do you see the role of that changing the landscape, or kind of pushing a little bit the conversation that's been happening in these stages?
I mean, what is so great about it is that they can set the agenda, and they can be like, this is what we're experiencing in life. And this is not just like on statelessness, this is all kinds of topics, right? And just saying like, this is what we experience in school. This is what we experience like out in society, when we do our hobbies, our sports, and only children and young people themselves are gonna know what it's like to be a child and a young person today. Even if I've been a child at one point in time, but I don't know what it's like today, and I don't know what it's like for kids today. So that's what's so great, that they can set the agenda, and they can be like, hey, these are the problems, and then they can also like push for change in all of those areas themselves. But what we see is that there's a lot of like ageism. There's a lot of like, oh, but you're so young, you don't know about that, or like, you don't know anything. So it's hard to sort of gain that momentum to have them be listened. So what I do in my work is I just work as a platform for them, where I'm like, hey, here's this politician, and yes, here are these kids, like, neat, talk. Which I think is great, but we're also kind of seeing that there's a threat, and we see it with Greta too, right? Like, young people are seen as kind of like a threat to society because they often speak the truth, no bullshit, nothing. They're very like, this is what's going on, here's the problem, here's the solution, you're responsible, do something. And often politicians don't want to do anything, so they're like, no, but you don't know what you're talking about. But often they do. I mean, not often, like they do. Like they do know what they're talking about, especially when it comes to their own lives and the future that they're gonna. And we always talk about them as in the future, but yes, it's important. But also like currently, right now, what kind of childhood do they have? What kind of society are they living in? They're not just the future; they're also now, and it's important to listen to them and for them to be able to set the agenda and be like, this is what we see. So we need to give more influence to, because now there's policies that are affecting them, but they cannot really change them. They cannot vote. They cannot have their voices heard. But there's all these policies that are affecting them, and they should have to stay in that.
I think what you're saying is really interesting, because even if I think back to my experience as a child, people often dismissed, and they didn't want to validate any of my concerns, any of my thinking. They would either infantilize me by saying, oh, that's cute, like you're really into social activism, social justice, that's cute. Or they would say, exactly, you don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
you don't understand. It's more complex than that. It's difficult to make change happen. You know, there are a lot of excuses and a lot of displacing responsibility. Because I think as an adult, or as adults in our society, we have responsibility, not only over this present moment, but the future, and the future of generations like the ones that children are experiencing today. And I think often adults, they don't want to make decisions that don't necessarily concern them in a way that's not beneficial to them, right? So for example, if I know as a politician, if I'm old, or if I'm like 20 years away from dying, let's say, maybe they don't think about it so critically, but they probably think, well, whatever decisions I'm making now, first they need to improve my life as of right now. So they make decisions for themselves. And if I am making decisions that are going to impact other people, well, they still need to be to my benefit. So, because I'm not going to be around for too long, so I need to benefit now, right? Rather than in the future. So they make these compromises for short-term, you know, whatever, economic gain, you know, influence, power, whatever. And then the trade-off is they never face the consequences. Yeah. Not just accountability in their lifetime, but the consequences of those choices and decisions are going to be felt by future generations and current generations of young people. And this is a very frustrating place to be as a young person, and often it can lead to hopelessness. I think maybe you see that in your work. Yeah. That a young person today is not only facing challenges that, you know, are not challenges we should dismiss, but are actually very serious ones, but we're also facing conditions that our parents and grandparents, they fought for, that are, you know, slowly deteriorating, and we are no longer given the access, because people just stop caring about children and about the future. Everything has become so much for short gain and short-term gain in this capitalist world that we live in. And I think children, it's not just that they speak truth to power, is that they have the sort of ability to, they are the reason why we should care about progress in society, right? So if they are against the decisions we're making today, we should be paying attention, right? Because if we're saying we care about our children, we care about our families, our communities, we can't just say, ignore what the children are saying, ignore what the minors are saying. You have to listen. And that's why people get so bothered by, you know, young people like Greta and other youth, you know, advocating for themselves and being activists, because they know they're speaking to them and telling them, hey, we know you're doing this the wrong way, and we're going to face those consequences. And they don't like it. They don't like being held accountable or being told off by young people who know the truth. Yeah. And this is something that we're seeing more and more. I think young people, I think they're getting better at advocating for themselves as well, because of social media, perhaps, because of, you know, democratization of access to media outlets in general. But I also think that a lot of young people, they feel a sense of cynicism and kind of hopelessness from having spoken their truth, not being validated or listened to. So how do you kind of navigate that from a policy perspective, but also from like a personal perspective, working with these children? How do you navigate kind of balancing hopeful, you know, faith in the system that things, you know, will improve and there will be progress there, and this sort of hopelessness and cynicism of being like, you know what, I've seen it. It doesn't work. Yeah. How do you balance this in your own work, like in your own life, I guess?
I think you need to be fueled by anger.
Okay.
And then I think it's also good to take a break. I mean, I've been in civil society one way or another. I think it's been 17 years now. It's been a long time. I think it's good to take breaks. And then I went into the private sector for 2 years. And then I was like, this is even worse. I'm going back. So I feel like you just need to be like driven by just like not letting some people abuse the system, power, and just like being fueled by anger. And I feel like especially working with like young people or people that are younger than me. I mean, in Sweden, we're so obsessed with age.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, how old are you? And like you're considered young until you're like 40. In a way, or it's like, and then if you're more than like 55, you're no longer you're useless to society. So it's very like you have a very narrow window where what you say is being valued. Which is like the politician age, So for me, that is also frustrating. But I feel like you need to just be fueled by the anger and be like, there's nothing else that I could do, because I feel like even if, okay, let's say I make no change, I was still on the right side of history.
I love it.
And I was still doing everything I could in my power to make change. But of course, there's days that I'm like crying. I'm like at the office, I'm like, I can't handle this, because I'm like, this is so frustrating and they're not listening and they don't care. But then it's also like, okay, what are other ways to do it? And I think that's what's so inspiring to work with kids, because they find these like inspiring ways to bring about change. And in Swedish we call it like busig revolution. So yeah, it's like I remember one time they would send like empty Christmas gifts to all the local politicians. Whoa. And then when they unwrapped them, we even dropped it off at like the kommunhus or something, in like a big bag. It was like, Santa's here, all the kids are like giving you gifts. And then when they opened it up, there was just a note that said like, there are children in Sweden that can't afford to celebrate Christmas.
Wow.
And that was it, these kinds of things, like I get goosebumps thinking about it. Yeah. Because for me, I'm like, yes, like these are the things that we need. Like they need to sort of
feel it in their own skin.
Yeah, because I know also myself, like I was back when I was like an intern at the UN, and I was like working with humanitarian issues, I would only hear like 10,000 people today were harmed in this, 20,000. Like after a while, it's so normalized, you just hear it, it just becomes a day, like part of your everyday life. And I feel like that's what it's like for politicians also, where they're just like, yes, we'll have this policy and this policy and this policy. Like, they stop caring about people. They stop caring about the issue. And I think that's the difference between us activists and politicians. Like, I would never go into, like, party politics because I could never just treat it as, like, a job. And I feel like that's maybe what they do. I need to be, like, feeling those emotions and acting because I feel that way about society and the developments that we see. And I think that's the difference. But I do think, like, sometimes you just gotta cry. Sometimes you gotta take a break for a few years. but it is, like, very, Yeah,
you know what? It's really interesting to hear you say this, because I thought you were going to take the diplomatic route and be like, I'm fueled by the belief that everything will change if we just put enough work into it. But you're like, anger. Yeah. Anger is what drives me. And honestly, it's a beautiful to hear you say that, because often in our society we're told, use, positive thinking and hopeful, faith and all these things. And you're like, anger. Anger is the one thing that keeps you activated and keeps you human and keeps you going.
It is, because it's like, do I think that all human rights in my lifetime will be fulfilled? No. Absolutely not. I don't think so. Do I think that we can take baby steps? Yes. Do I think that sometimes they're going to do what they did with the Convention on the Rights of the Child, where it's like, here, it is now national legislation, and then try to water it down? Absolutely. I think those things are going to happen. And I think it depends very much on who's in power and who is given that power, essentially. But I will still be there until the day I die and be like, this is wrong. I'm angry about it. I want human rights fulfilled. And I hope that I move it to a little, like, in centimeter, like at least,
an incremental step towards a more just world.
Yeah.
I love that. Because I feel like I'm fueled by anger often. But anger with me is not the most productive, because I think anger with me is a source of sadness, because I feel like usually I get angry when I feel powerless. Right. And I don't know if that's always... I think I can be a bit idealistic about this whole like activism and advocacy thing, because I often get these notions of, we could fix everything if we really wanted to. Like I am a very hopeful person, but then I get the opposite end, which is I get very depressed and sad when I'm angry that things are not working, or that we do get that
backtracking.
Yeah.
You know, we do take 2 steps forward, but then all of a sudden we're taking 3 steps backward. And I
Yeah.
was like, what was that? That was so much work.
I know.
That was so much work. And I get like very defeated.
Yeah.
I get this defeatist attitude sometimes. But I think it's inspiring to hear someone like you to be like, you know what? Anger can drive you and can like kind of keep you motivated to show up every day.
Yeah.
Right? Because I guess if certain emotions do come through, like in you listening to these news or talking to these people and seeing the injustice, and if those emotions can fuel you and you can channel them into your work,
Yeah.
you know, then you could just use that to
Yeah.
keep motivated, you know?
But you gotta be strategic about it. So
Okay.
so even if I'm angry, that's like my core emotion all the time. When I hear politics, I'm like, it's not what I portray in meetings with politicians or when I do my campaigns.
Mhm.
So I'm very diplomatic, strategic, you know, point out legal things. I will not be, and leave that to the activist. I feel like I'm an office activist, you know?
Okay.
I'm an activist at heart,
Mm.
but I will use writing, I will use, you know, communication and diplomacy in a way to do my activism. And then there are the people out angry, shouting, demonstrating, barricades. Like, I feel like now I'm too old for that, so I'm leaving it to other people.
But there's
But
a
it was
role.
me.
Yeah,
It
but
was
there was a
me.
role.
Yeah.
There's a role for everybody.
Absolutely.
I think this is what people often misunderstand about activism and advocacy. They don't understand that you don't always have to be the one going to the demonstrations shouting. You can be doing a lot of that activism in other forms,
Absolutely.
in other media.
Yeah.
And people forget that. I think people don't understand that there's elements to a revolution that don't necessarily involve being the loudest person in the room
Yeah.
or being the one, shouting at politicians. I do think there's room for everybody.
Absolutely.
And then
they're
finding
all
your
needed.
space.
We all
Yeah.
need all of them. Yeah. And we always talk about like quiet and loud advocacy in my work.
that.
And the loud is like maybe behind shut doors. Maybe we don't talk about it. Maybe it could be a high level meeting with a person that we don't even put it on social media. But we hope and we think that it will make a lot of change. And then there's the loud advocacy, which is more like a loud campaign or like getting signatures or being out on the town, you know, demonstrating or all these things. So we always talk about both of them, and I think both of them are needed, but you got to be strategic about which to use when. So depending on the topic and what is it that you want to change, what can have the most effect in that.
So you have to have a lot of tact.
Yeah.
Kind of know which one am I going to deploy today.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard, you know, sometimes that's hard to know. Sometimes you just want to do it all. You can do it all. It's just also like you have to also take a step back afterwards and be like, okay, what was it that actually made a change? Sometimes that's also hard to know, and you just should keep going with it all, you know. But you also cannot do everything because also in civil society we see a lot of burnout happening. So it's also important to find that like balance of like, okay, we've done what we can. We didn't win this time, but
Tomorrow is a new day.
yeah, next time we'll get that.
Love that. So you're mentioning a lot of this sort of, there's meetings behind closed doors. There's meetings, that we put the media behind it. We really try to make a public campaign about it. Can you give me an example? It can be specific or just general of a campaign or a specific, project you worked on that you felt this yielded results and I felt really good about it afterwards. Or is there always some sort of compromise? Because I struggle with this idea of compromise in diplomacy.
I understand that.
And because I think maybe because I'm just such a black and white thinking person. I really think it's either this or it's that. You can't give an inch because then they'll take the whole yard. So how do you find? Did you ever have an example in your career of okay, we achieved this and I actually felt that it made a difference that wasn't just chipped away at slowly,
Maybe this is a bad example because it wasn't the outcome that we wanted, but we got the reply that we needed, the closure maybe that we needed.
Okay, but give me that example. I like this.
So you've been working for a third optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of the Child, giving children the right to sort of go straight to the Child Rights Committee in Geneva if they don't have their rights fulfilled in Sweden. the government has been saying like there's been a lot of pressure. Like a lot of organizations have worked with this. We've been talking about it for years. And then we were meeting with other states when Sweden was reviewed in the UN for the human rights work. We were meeting with other countries to be like, you need to push for the third optional protocol because we need to know what's happening. Because the government kept saying like, oh, it's out for review, and yeah, we have this like lawyer looking at it, and we'll get back to you. Like nobody knew what was happening. It was like years ago. We're like, what's going on? And then so we actually talked to many states that gave them the recommendation to Sweden to be like, hey, you need to ratify the protocol.
Nice.
But that is also when we got our final reply, and also maybe the closure that we needed to know that this government is not going to happen under this government.
Because so they were forced into a corner to give an answer.
Yes, because you have to either accept it or you have to deny the recommendation, or you have to partly accept it and explain, kind of note it or kind of explain why. They did not accept it, and they said that it is too much of an administrational burden on children, which I think children would not mind in this case.
Yeah.
And instead, we should make sure that Sweden, like, that we have all these like national mechanisms instead for these kinds of things, which is good, but it's also not relevant. It's not the same thing.
Yes.
But at least we got our closure, and that was like, okay, we did our work. We had like many states recommend it because of us, and that was already like the push that we needed to at least get the closure. So even if we didn't see the outcome that we wanted, we now know, okay, we're not going to put so much time, effort, and campaigning into it because we know with this government it's not going to happen.
Yeah, you know where to prioritize your efforts. This is really interesting because I think that's part of the work that people often don't talk about. It's not just the success, but it's actually like just knowing what not to pursue.
Right.
Because it does, at the end of the day, we all have limited time, resources, staffing,
Right.
So to know what not to pursue, and to also corner the government into taking ownership. I think that's a really big problem in Swedish politics. It's like they like to push all this agenda, but then they never take accountability or ownership, even for the
smallest things.
The smallest things. And I'm like, no, you don't get it both ways.
Yeah.
You can't do the crappy, policy and then just say, it wasn't me.
Yeah.
Like Shaggy. It wasn't me.
Yeah, no.
I'm like, you can't have both. And I think this is problematic because then people also don't know who to blame.
Right.
But then in this case, like cornering them and saying, hey, now you took ownership because you needed to. Like you were forced to say yes or no. What is happening?
Yeah.
Give us the state of the matter. Yeah.
And we now know, okay, let's go to the other parties in parliament and try to push it there.
Yeah.
Because that's where the change is going to happen. Because this government clearly said, no, not going to happen.
Yeah.
Even though they were like, oh, we're looking into it. That's lies.
Yeah, they're always trying to play we're unaware, or like it takes time. Next meeting, we can talk about this.
No, and I mean, I hope it also is embarrassing for them that
it is
these other states that have ratified it came to them and be like, hey, why haven't you? You're supposed to be like the champion of human rights.
Exactly.
What's going on? So I hope that, maybe they're, public name and shaming kind of thing.
I think you're totally right. Like shame sometimes and kind of embarrassment might be the only thing that really affects these guys. That's why they don't not always. But that's why they don't like comedians talking about that, because they're like, who do they think they are? Like freedom of speech until the comedian comes around and says something.
That's where we end it. Yeah.
But you do need to push them, because what other mechanisms do we have to make them, feel bad about this?
Yeah.
They don't have a conscience, clearly. So you either shame them publicly, you affect their influence or their credibility, I guess.
Yeah.
Because, how are these other member states, how are they going to take Sweden seriously if they don't, if they, like, put your money where your mouth is. If you say this, then follow through.
Yeah.
If you're doing something and you're saying something else, like you have a discrepancy there.
Yeah.
You can't play both sides all the time.
Sadly, Sweden still has a good reputation.
I know.
So we have to start every meeting with all the other representatives it's not what it used to be.
Yes.
The field that we're working in right now, we're navigating. It's difficult because also they cut the funding for civil society. And I see civil society as kind of a watchdog. I see it as a democratic, like, instrument to, make sure that human rights, democracy, freedoms, like, all these things are being developed in the right way.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's such a, civil society in Sweden is so big and it's so important.
So important.
You have organizations for everything. You're like the rights of the butterflies, like you do, like, and I think that's beautiful that you can like coexist and you can have all these small organizations working for anything.
Yeah.
But to also like have to cut like all of our funding is also a way of saying we don't care about you, we don't care about democracy, we don't care about you watching us. We don't care about you reviewing
holding us accountable.
Yes, exactly. And that is really what, so sometimes you just gotta do it through other means. Like you go to other countries and be like, but you should push for it instead because they're not listening to us. So it's really about strategy. It's like a game of chess sometimes, they have to think about all these things.
It's just so wild to me. I think that in all the work that you do, keeping up momentum and hope and there's so much also complexity, not just in the law, but complexity in the situations, in the diplomacy of the work that you do. I feel like if there's a message for people out there listening to the podcast here, what would you like people to know about the work that you do, in order to maybe either get some more backing or support, or what is something essential that maybe Swedish people today in our society, they don't know about civil society, about NGOs, about the work that you guys do, that you think is something that you need to leave here on the table, that people need to be aware?
I think that we are under attack.
Okay.
Financially, also a lot of colleagues are being actually physically attacked, like there's like both in organizations, but also individuals. So I think that we are being threatened as civil society and as watchdogs of human rights. It is a completely different playing field than it was 10, 15 years ago. A lot has changed. And we cannot do the work that we want to do and should be doing. I mean, with Trump, 1/3 of the funding, like globally, was gone.
Wow.
So it's important for the whole Save the Children movement, international Save the Children movement. So, and it's not just us; it's all organizations. Shrinking democratic, like civic space, is very much now, here and now, and people don't realize that, and it's happening before our eyes, with every little policy and change in funding and that the government is doing. So it's very hard for us to navigate, and you have to be more angry than ever to sort of get through it. But it's also a lot of organizations need to like cut their funding. They had to some of them had to like stop the whole movement that they're doing, like everything that they're doing.
The events, the programs that they run in the communities that are most underserved.
Yeah, and it's really, and it's the affected communities and minorities that are essentially the targets of this, and that they're using civil society as a platform for that, to sort of, if they defund us, we cannot do our important work, and therefore these groups of people that they clearly don't care about are being even more unfortunate in their way. Like they can't have the support. They're affected very negatively about this. Yeah, and I think that is what's happening. It's about oppression, and it's about like watering down human rights, democracy, and oppressing the oppressed even more. And I really like, with Swedes, we're very much like, oh, okay, like yeah, like we don't really care. And I wish we were more like the French, like we take to the streets.
You and the anger coming through again.
Like at
I know
least,
what
like
you mean.
they will be like, no, stop. This is our country. This is our society. This is our people. Not okay. Here we kind of like, oh, but
it's not my problem.
Yeah, it's not my problem. It's not. They must be right in saying all these things, and blaming certain groups of people for for our society and all these things. And that's what they're very much like the rhetoric of like criminality and
Yeah, they're
migration
criminals and they're
the whole
illegals.
thing. It's like, no, it's like the opposite. It is the oppression that is leading to these things, and you're oppressing them even more, and then it's happening even more, and then you can come in and like put children in prison, not like realizing that they're victims of this. No child is ever gonna wake up one day and be like, I think I'm gonna be a criminal today. I think I'm gonna shoot another child or join a gang. Like, no, they're obviously like groomed into it, and there's always like, you have to look at what is going on in this child's life.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess that's my message. Like, don't be so implicit and complicit in this.
Yes.
Like, don't
Complicit and complacent.
Yes, like, don't, like, we have to look at what's happening. We have to be angry. People are like, yeah, but it's not that bad. It's not that bad yet. But no, we're already there. Like, in 100 years, they're gonna study this time period in history books, and they're gonna be like, here is the reason why civil society fell, and here's the reason why democracy was like completely watered down, and here is how these things are already happening in our country, sadly, and I think also all over the world, in most countries, or in, no, almost all countries, but
most democratic.
Yeah.
Mm.
And we can see that it's happening more and more. So do something, even if it's a small thing. If it's a sign up for something, if it's donate money to an organization, as if it's just share something on Facebook, if it's just speak up about something, because it's happening here now, and in civil society we're very much in it. We see it every day, but I think for like everyday people that are doing other jobs and just going about their life, it's a non-issue, but it really is an issue,
and it will affect them eventually.
Absolutely. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, maybe in 10 years or 20 years. And that's when they're going to be like, oh, what happened? How did this come about? And we're like, yeah, we see it every single day with the bureaucracy. Like, they're putting like more demands on civil society. Like, we have to prove that we're even more democratic. The threshold's really high. They're cutting our finances. Like, there's so many, like, you're not allowed to demonstrate anymore in certain areas, like, because of security reasons. So it's a lot of things that are happening at the same time that is kind of like we have to re-navigate the playing field in a way.
Yeah. Jehna, I think that everything you've said and everything you've shared today, first of all, it taught me new things. And I feel like I'm someone who's very much in the trenches of this playing field. And I never understood also that the work that you do and the work that a lot of other people do in diplomacy and in, running programs such as the ones you run for Save the Children, how important and crucial it is. So I appreciate it that you came on the podcast and you talked a little bit about the work that you do. And I think a lot of people should be concerned about the state of the matter. Even if they're not directly affected today, like you said, they will be affected in the future. And, what happens when there's no more migrants or immigrants or kids to blame? They come after you and your communities, and this shouldn't be the reason why you care. But if you don't care for any other human rights reasons, you should care because it will affect you, and you're closer to the most vulnerable members of our society than you'll ever be to people in power. So you need to be able to extend that humanity to people around you. And I think that we see this today in Sweden. We see it in other countries as well. It is not an exclusive, problem or situation to our country, but there are a lot of things that in the work that you're doing that can kind of help the situation. It's just that we need to empower people also, like you said, to take democracy and see it as a civic duty. Like, you need to protect civil society. You need to also protect the rights of children and adults in your society. They're doing the work, the bureaucracy, the paperwork to get to citizenship, so they have equal rights as you.
we need to be able to say these are things we should stand for and unite under, and not just be complacent because it's happening to our neighbors, not to us yet. And I think that a lot of this needs to be emphasized time and time again. One of my colleagues in the company, Loredana, we just had her on the last episode. She always says, "I want to shake my Swedish colleagues by the shoulders. I want to shake them up." And I think we need a little bit more of that energy.
Yeah.
A little bit of shake them awake. Hey, this is happening. You know, pay attention. These are things that you should care about and should matter and do matter. And I hope that after today or after this conversation, some more people will be activated to do more in their communities and support the work, not only that you're doing, but other civil organizations are doing. Because democracy is not just voting every 4 years. Democracy is, we do it every day.
Yeah.
So, yes. Okay, thank you so much. If people want to follow you or they want to hear more about the work that you do, support the work that you do, what's the best way for them to do so?
I think for the work that I do every day, it's rbuf.se.
Okay.
I can, like all of our campaigns that's going on with Save the Children. It can also become, if you're under 25, you can become a member and it's free.
Cool.
I think that's the best option. And for myself, it's probably like LinkedIn. You can find me there.
Okay, great. So now we know. This has been Frankie and Jehna here from somewhere in Stockholm. Podcast production brought to you by Experience Stockholm. We're very happy to be featuring voices from the city, people who work in different careers, different fields. And then you get to hear a little bit more about what it's like, to live in our context. So thank you so much for being here today. And we will see you on the next one. Thank you. Hejdå!
Lost my backbone somewhere in Stockholm.
I moved to Sweden for maybe the most banal reason people move around the world. Love.
Of course.
There are less women into the jazz scene than men.
I remember my grandma saying, "Oh, why are you playing the saxophone? That's such a manly, instrument. You should play the violin or the flute." And I was like, "Come on, that's not fun."